Hi everybody, this is Brandon Cruz with Damons Real Texas Barbecue again. This video we're going to do about making sausage. We make sausage here pretty much at least once a month. So I'm going to show y'all all the ins and outs, all the secrets that we do to make our sausage. So what we start out with, our sausage is half beef, half pork. This is brisket trimmings. Every time we trim a brisket here, we save all our trimmings and it goes into our sausage. So it makes it a lot cheaper than having to go and buy beef to make sausage. This here is pork butts. It's the only thing we usually have to buy when we do make sausage. Now we also, when we trim our ribs, we keep those trimmings as well, and they go into it as well. Now we don't add any beef we don't add any beef fat or pork fat. Our briskets, we trim them because we save all the fat and make tallow and use that for our tortillas. So most of the fat has been taken off of this beef. As far as the pork butts, we don't trim them at all. We just cut them into chunks. What you have here is 50 pounds total, 25 pounds of beef, 25 pounds of pork. So I'm going to, here's my knife. Here's my knife. We'll okay, so we're just going to mix this up. So that way you have a nice even pork and beef mixture. And you can tell how much fat is on this pork. I mean, there's plenty. So there's no reason to add any fat. Get all your fat content for the sausage out of this pork. And you can see the beef is pretty much trimmed out, hardly any fat at all. A little bit, I mean, just from the marbling because they're really high grade briskets. So, okay. All right, I'm going to change my gloves real quick. All right, so now we're going to add our spices. So this is the spice we use. We've used this company forever, long before we ever opened a restaurant. I was using their their seasonings to make our sausage. This is German style smoked sausage seasoning with the cure. It's made by REO Spices out of Huntsville, Texas. You can find them at www.reospice.com. They make all sorts of sausage seasoning. You name it, they have it. It's fantastic because they make 25-pound bags and 50-pound bags. It's a 50-pounder, so that means all you have to do is take 25 pounds of pork, 25 pounds of beef, add your seasoning to it. It even comes with the cure. You just mix that into a bowl and throw it on your meat, and it's perfectly done. It'll come out perfect every time. They are fantastic. Check them out. Usually anything over $50 is free shipping, and it's at your door within 2 days. I mean, they're fantastic. I get our casings from there. Anything dealing with sausage, I usually get from REO. So here we have in the bowl, we have our seasoning. This is the cure. So what you'll do is just add this straight to the seasoning. Now you can make sausage without cure, but I wouldn't recommend it. Now, if you're not going to smoke it, then that's not a problem. But if you're going to smoke it, you want to add your cure to your seasoning, because what the cure does is it kills any bacteria that could be growing in the meat while it's going through the smoking process. There are safe levels where you're supposed to keep meat at. Anything under 40 degrees or above 140. That area between those two is a danger zone. So if your meat is within that zone for more than 4 hours, that bacteria can grow and it can be harmful. By adding cure to your seasoning, that keeps that bacteria from growing, because if you do a cold smoke, the sausage will stay under 140 degrees for hours. until you're done smoking. So it may not even get to 140. You might pull it before it gets to 140, and that could be really dangerous if you don't have cure in your seasoning. So I advise, if you're smoking, always add cure. But if you're not going to smoke, what we call serve green sausage, where basically you stuff it and then freeze it right away, then you don't really need to add cure. When you do add that, it's going to turn your meat pink. It No matter how long you cook that sausage, it'll always look pink. We do a sausage burger here that we don't smoke. What we do is we take this recipe, we turn it into beef patties, and then we throw them right on the grill. Now, I add cure to that because we call it a sausage burger. And to me, sausage is always pink because it always has cure. So naturally, I want it to be the same, the patties versus the links. So I add cure to it, even though it's not getting smoked. But okay, so now we've added our cure, and you're going to give it a good mix. You want this to be mixed thoroughly. Now, there is one thing that I do add to this seasoning, and the reason for it. Okay, so for years, this is exactly what I would do. I would throw this into my meat and start grinding. But one day, a friend of mine who has way more experience making sausage than me, he was like, "You want to add some mustard seed to it?" And I was like, "Sure, what does it do?" He said, "I don't know what it does." He said, "But man, it just gives that sausage a nice pop." So I tried it. As soon as I did, I fell in love with it. So that's what I have here. This is 3 ounces of mustard seed. So you do 6 ounces for every 100 pounds of meat. So this is half of that. This is 50 pounds. So this is 3 ounces of mustard seed. So we add that to our seasoning as well. Get that out of the way. Mix it up really well. So now we have our seasoning, our cure, our mustard seed. Now, a lot of people will grind all their meat and then mix their seasoning into it. I don't do that. To me, that's a lot harder. This is the simplest thing to do, is just before you grind, throw all your seasoning on your meat. And we're just going to mix all of this seasoning into this meat. It's a whole lot easier to mix it when it's big chunks like this than it is when it's ground into basically hamburger. And as it goes through this grinder, it's going to mix beef and pork, seasoning, everything into it. Now, if you were making jalapeno cheese sausage right now, which this sausage is going to be pepper jack cheese. No jalapenos in it because the jalapenos are already in your cheese. But if you were making jalapeno sausage or jalapeno cheese sausage, your jalapenos would go in right now, because the grinder is going to do all your mixing for you. You don't need to worry about having to dice up jalapenos to tiny, tiny little pieces, because the grinder will take care of all that. I learned this from a good friend of mine. Like I said, the one who told me, "You want to add some mustard seed?" He taught me this, and he's taught a lot of people over the years. He's the most experienced sausage maker I know. It's the way he does it. It's the way I do it. I'm passing his knowledge that he taught me on to you. I've seen him make 1,000 pounds of sausage in one day. I've helped him make 1,000 pounds of sausage in one day. And that's from grinding all the way to having a finished product ready to be vacuum sealed. 1,000 pounds. All right, we're all ready to grind. One thing you always want to do with your grinder, at least an hour before you start to grind, throw your parts into a freezer. Let them get nice and cold, because as you're going through this grinder is going to heat up. It's going to have friction inside there. Parts are going to get hot. You don't want it to cook your sausage as it's grinding, and it will do it. I've actually, when you take this thing apart to clean it when it's done, you will see meat stuck to it that is almost baked onto its parts. So I always stick it in the grinder. I usually do it the night before, but at least an hour before you start. Throw it in your freezer and let it get really nice and cold. All right, and also get yourself a dedicated grinder and a dedicated stuffer if you plan on doing this often. I used to have just a little grinder that had a stuffer attachment. You grind and then you stuff. It'd take you all day. It's a whole lot better to invest. If you're going to do this regularly, invest in a good grinder, invest in a good stuffer, keep those separate that way. And this is a Walton grinder. It's a commercial grinder. I went with Walton. I studied a bunch of different types of grinders when I was looking for one. I saw butchers make reviews about the Walton. This is a Walton number 32. There was a butcher that says he'd been using his every single day for the last 5 years. And if it's good enough for a butcher, then it's good enough for us. So we'll get it going. There we go. Okay, so we'll start grinding this. Like I said, it's all mixed up, ready to go now. And this big Walton number 32 will literally go as fast as you can drop it. It'll grind it. Actually, one time, making sausage out of wild hog, and gave some to my father-in-law, and he brought me back a bullet the next day and was like, here, you might want this back. I was like, what is this? He said, a bullet that actually went through the grinder and it cut the bullet up. Never stopped, just kept on going. I still have that chunk of bullet somewhere that it's just a little piece. You could see it perfectly sheared off. Didn't do one thing to my grinder. And as you can see, it's mixing beef, pork, everything together. And then we're going to do a double grind anyway. This is our first grind. We're going to send it back through the grinder again. And by that time, all the seasoning will be perfectly mixed. The beef and the pork will be mixed. And we didn't make ourselves exhausted trying to mix the two. We just finished the first grind. There's still meat in the barrel of this grinder. So to get that out, there's two ways that I know of. One is bread. You can run bread through it. It'll clean it out. What I always do, though, is I use ice. And the only thing with ice, sometimes it'll literally freeze up inside the barrel, and it can stop your grinder. So you want to just add it a little at a time. And you can see it's pushing the sausage out. The reason I use ice is because we're going to add water to this before we stuff it. So, of course, this ice isn't going to do anything that the water's not going to do. Also, earlier I was telling you when to add jalapenos. You add the jalapenos before you grind. If you're going to do any type of cheese, you do not run it through this grinder. If you do, you will not have cheese sausage. it will completely disappear and you will never find it in the meat. You might find little tiny pieces every now and then, but for the most part, you will not have cheese in your sausage. So cheese is the last thing that gets added to this with the water right before we stuff. All right, so looks like all the meat has basically come out, and we can go ahead and do our second grind, which I won't bore you by filming, but we're going to grind this one more time, then put it into the fridge until later tonight when we're ready to stuff.